right, well, let's go ahead and get started, and perhaps Sue will still join us yet. Welcome everyone to the January 19th Redevelopment Authority. Please call the roll.
Birmingham,
Present.
Hintz, Stam, Lasky, Conick, Belter,
Here.
and Palmieri.
Here. All right, we'll move on to the approval of the November 17 minutes.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
All right, and please call the roll on, I did send ahead some minor correction to the minutes regarding, I think it was on page 5. It was just maybe a transcription error regarding the entertainment district, the Sawdust, referencing the Sawdust district rather than what was referred to in the original wording.
Yep, and we did have that that will be reflected in the updated minutes. So yep, we have that noted, staff has that, so we will make sure that is changed.
Any other discussion on the minutes? All right, please call the roll.
Birmingham,
Aye.
Lasky,
Aye.
Belter,
Aye.
Palmieri.
Aye. And I guess I'll just turn it over right away to Kelly on the land acquisition for day-by-day update.
Sure, thank you very much. I just wanted to give the Redevelopment Authority members an update based on our last discussion that we had back in November. If you recall, there was an item on the agenda where we were considering spot blighting a property on 2 properties actually on the corner of Broad and CP for the purpose of the city to use CDBG funds to purchase the property from the Oshkosh Housing Authority and then turn sell it to the day-by-day warming shelter organization. And since then, after that meeting, staff, took a lot of the comments that RDA members had as far as questioning, is the RDA the correct body, to be processing this sort of request of, acquiring this land for this use. And, is it really our, responsibility to spot blight it, to use those CDBG funds. So I did take a look at the CDBG manual and talked with our CDBG consultant and a few other folks and our city attorney. And it was determined that there probably is a more appropriate path forward for the city to follow our 2021 action plan. And that would be just to go through our normal process of acquiring it through where we would go to Plan Commission and Council. So those 2 meetings have taken place in January. And just last week, Council did approve the city staff to move forward with the acquisition to acquire the 2 parcels from the Oshkosh Housing Authority for the use of the day-by-day warming shelter. But the city will not acquire those properties until the day-by-day warming shelter organization does have their funding in place where, they have the funding, the loans, everything needed to actually construct the facility. And then as a side item, there were some members of the community and other organizations that had expressed concern with that location and had volunteered to help day by day look for other locations in the central city area. So right now, day by day warming shelter organization and some other organizations, community partners in Oshkosh are considering other locations. So right now, the city is just somewhat in a holding pattern, and we're supporting that new site selection as much as we could when they ask us for information. but I just wanted to let the RDA members kind of know where that project was at. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. If not, we will definitely keep you in the loop, as I'm sure you'll hear about it. But if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I think we're ready to move on to the next item.
Yes, the draft housing study update.
Yes, so this is something that is actually very exciting for the city. We have for a long time, we've been talking about doing a housing study. And I believe we sent the actual draft housing study to everybody in your packet, so you should have it. And if folks are listening in today, over online, we do have it on our city website, and I have a screenshot here. It's under hot topics actually, and you can just click the link and it will take you right to the report. So right now we are in a phase of, since it is a draft study, we are collecting comments from the community. We are going to be taking it to different boards and commissions to get their thoughts on it. And just earlier this week, we did have an event at the convention center where our consultant came in and talked about it. And we are also looking at having, I guess you could call it kind of an online forum where we're going to present it to if people would prefer to learn about it in an online setting rather than in person. So we're trying to accommodate as much, trying to facilitate as many comments as possible. And when you click the link, it'll take you actually to our consultant's website, and they have a platform there where you can submit comments right on that. So like I said, we're trying to provide a lot of outreach and a lot of options for folks to submit comments. But I did want to touch on a few things. And this conversation here is, it's really going to kind of go into some of our next couple agenda items as far as, the RDA's, what's the responsibility, what can the RDA provide as far as, improving housing in the city and encouraging redevelopment. So I don't know if everybody's had a chance to look through the housing study yet, but I just wanted to highlight a few, thoughts that our consultant gathered when he was talking to the different stakeholders. And he had a lot of community groups that met, and he had a lot of one-on-one visits. And then obviously we had a lot of folks that submitted survey, comments to us via poll call or us through the consultant's website. So Chapter 1, Community Vision, what I have up on the screen right now, it's just a snapshot of some of the thoughts of the feedback that, our consultant received from our community. So I thought it was kind of interesting. This is people's perception. This is what they're thinking. But if you did read through the document, you'll see that a lot of it is very true. We know that there is a lack of inventory. We know that there's a lot of, the rental gaps between the less expensive and then, newer units coming onto the market. There's a big gap in there. And then, of course, just the cost of materials is going up, and, trying to have more development in kind of that mid-range, for single family homes, the 200,000 to 300,000 range. And then just starting to talk about in the future, aging in place, maybe perhaps, more families are, living together where that's multi-generational, or else we do have more older folks, baby boomers, that want to stay in their house. And how can we help, help these people stay in place, but obviously make it, the home safe enough for aging in place. And then there was just some needs. We heard from a lot of folks that they want to see those condos, and that's something that, I know we have talked about with this group before, and just seeing different types of housing alternatives and different types. And we are seeing more of that. Evergreen has that pocket neighborhood off of 9th where they're renting it to, seniors, folks 55 and older. And then Chet Wiesenberg did those basically standalone condos out on 20th across from the YMCA that have been very successful. So we are starting to see different types of housing. And just from the, the reaction that, those two developments had, I'd say there's definitely a built up need for those. So I think we want to continue to encourage that type of housing that we don't have a lot of in our community, but there definitely might be a need for. Executive housing was something that has been discussed here quite a bit too. A lot of executives we know, they say that there's more housing options maybe in the town of Algoma, town of Black Wolf, or up in like the Neenah area. So how can we attract, that type of housing in our community also? So those were some of the, sediments that the consultant gathered from folks. Did anybody else have, I guess, any questions or comments or thoughts on just kind of, what the information that we gathered?
Kelly, first of all, I was just curious, besides staff, how many people showed up Monday for that on the virtual public participation?
Sure, we had just under 20,
Okay.
which, it's hard. It's a Monday night, it's in person, it's at 6 o'clock. So we are going to be, like I said, we are going to try the online platform also. And then we are trying to market it as much as we can. And we have been getting quite a few comments via the website. So we are generating input, from other ways besides just having the in-person meeting.
The other question I have was, I was really disappointed that we didn't see more, unless I missed it. I haven't read it word for word yet. Any reference to ADUs and as a recommendation, policy wise, maybe I missed it.
We did talk about that, and you know what?
ADU.
Accessory dwelling units.
Yes,
Sorry.
they did talk about it, and I actually even highlighted it because I said, oh, you need to put that definition in the front. So I will try to go through here and find it. It wasn't a huge section, but they did talk about, we need to think outside of the box for other options such as ADUs, to account for if it's, having multi-generational, families kind of staying in the same area, or folks who might want to try to supplement their income or their mortgage to rent it out. So I will find it for you as we're kind of going through here. Of course, I didn't mark
I
it.
know. The other thing I wanted to compliment on was, I've long thought that Oshkosh could use a Community Development Corporation, CDC, and I guess I'd be interested in hearing, what staff's thoughts are as to how a CDC might relate or not with the RDA.
Yeah, and that was something, that was one of the recommendations. And really what it is, it's, you kind of think of like the Greater Oshkosh Economic Development Corporation is that public-private group. This is more for housing and community development. And they did identify potentially some partners like Go H&I or other folks like that it might be interesting to see if they would be willing to take on that role to help facilitate private development projects, but having, that public, the public assistance. And sometimes it's easier, for that public-private organization to acquire different types of funding and grants and different things like that. So they have some case studies in here of other communities that have done that, but that was a recommendation that, they said that we should definitely consider as we move forward with the implementation phase of it. I just wanted to, on the screen here is Chapter 4. I thought it was also interesting from what they found is, our assets and challenges. And, a lot of things, that, we see sometimes as, might be, difficult to try to do, like infill opportunities and housing conditions. They did provide a lot of great recommendations as far as how we can, try to face those issues and how we can try to, incorporate that into like our city programs that we have here. So we're going to be doing a lot of, reviewing of our current programs, and we'll obviously be having probably multiple workshops with council on, what items we should be looking at implementing. I can't talk today, and just to get an idea as far as what our programming should look at. So If you haven't read through all of it, I urge you to. It's a lot of great information. And I think, the document is definitely going to have an impact on how the RDA potentially looks at acquiring properties and what areas they look at acquiring. And from a city standpoint, we're even looking at like the CDBG funding that we receive. Is there ways that, we can maybe potentially retool some of that money to use on some of these recommendations. So a lot of exciting, things to look forward to, but I think it will really be great for the community. And I just wanted to show this slide right here. And this is something we've looked at this figure before, and they did do some updating, but you can still see there is a need for that low income housing. That's where the income range is $0 to $25,000. But then there still is that gap of housing needed for that $75,000 range up past $200,000. So that's something that, we'll continue to take a look at. And as we're trying to look at those different types of housing, types and opportunities, this is, going to be a figure that we'll continue to look back on and just making sure that we're hopefully, meeting all those, where the demand is.
And Kelly, I just might point out for folks on page 104, I had this dog-eared, that category, the low cost under 200,000 or below market rate rentals. It says this type of development represents 37% of the 10-year demand for ownership. And that's the highest of all that were described.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really something that, city staff has been talking a lot about. It was in response with the 200,000 with the single family. Well, I'm just seeing, was it rentals or the single family this type? Oh, or 30% for rentals. So, like I said, just with the high costs with just materials right now, and then, with lending and everything, there's just a lot of different variables right now that are impacting the cost. And unfortunately, a lot of times those go to the renters or to the, the folks that are purchasing the home. And so that's the city's task, and it's our task to take a look and see if there's any ways we can try to reduce those costs to encourage more folks to live in Oshkosh, but, be able to afford it and, be within that, I guess, suggested, portion of their income for housing. We don't want folks spending more of their income on housing than they should be. So, so this is something, we can continue to talk about it. If folks would like maybe more time to comb through it, we can certainly have it on the next agenda to talk about again. But like I said, we're going to be continuing to do a lot of outreach. So I hope you'll be hearing about it, from different places in the community. And we're hoping that this will be a good guide for the city moving forward.
Kelly, could you just tell me, I did not find this table in the draft. Can you just tell me
Yep.
where I would find that?
Yes. Give me 1 minute here. On page 37.
Ah, okay. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Did anybody else have any questions?
Yes, Kelly, this is Sue.
Hi.
Was there anything in the report that surprised you? And did you feel that there was anything in the report that you would have liked to have seen but wasn't included?
As far as anything that surprised me, I still continue to be just surprised by, this figure where it just shows that huge gap in housing. And like I said, it surprises you, but then when you think about it, it makes sense. So I was surprised though, just as far as, they did a lot of different, analyzing as far as in the future, like how many units we'll need moving forward. The city has been doing we've been doing it, I think in here they have a graph somewhere where it's been showing how many units we've been adding each year. And, we've been keeping up. We add between multifamily, duplexes, and single family, roughly just over 100 a year. And this past year, in 2020, we had it looked like 120 multifamily units. So it just depends on projects that come and go. But what they did is they took a look at our, how many units we're adding, and then of course, just our population growth. And something that did surprise me is our population growth is actually much lower than other communities. And I'm trying to find the graph here that I was looking at for that. We had them compare to like the Fox cities, the communities in the Fox cities. And then we also had them look at we just even threw in like La Crosse. It's another college town that's somewhat similar. It's actually on page 28. The population changed from 2010 to 2020. And, Oshkosh grew just over 1%, where Fond du Lac was just under 3%. Neenah was about 7%. Appleton was 4%. And then Green Bay was over 3%, and then La Crosse was about just under 3%. So that was really surprising to me. And talking to our consultant, obviously it's a lot of different factors, but we kept coming back to having that housing stock. And he said, the available housing stock and the housing stock that people want to live in. And he did say, even with the population, with our growth, just being well over 1%, we're still going to need, I think he said, about 170 units moving ahead each year to just account for that. So it just shows you how far behind we are and what we need to do to get the type of units and homes out there that people want and can afford, and B, just to try to, keep up and try to find different ways to attract people to our community to hopefully, need more than 170 units. So I thought that was really interesting. But it's something, we hear workforce development a lot from our employers, and I think we're going to be having conversations with them too, to attract folks to the area. And there might be partnerships with the, some of our larger employers here.
Brad, I think you're muted.
I'm muted. You can't
Yes.
hear me?
No, you're good.
You're good now.
Yeah.
So does the report address geographic density as far as how these, like if we have clusters of certain things that impact different areas in different ways, and how that may be either a benefit or a detriment to certain areas in the community, and how to address that?
Clusters of,
like, let's say like a cluster of low income housing in one area that leads to a lot, a lot of pressure in that area, say in the school district, or, I'd say one school over another school, things like that.
sure. He does have some, I guess you could call them heat maps in here that looks at all of our different census tracts. So it's hard to dig down further than census tracts, but that's what we use a lot here. And in there, it talks about, the median income, household income, households paying more than 30% of their income on mortgage or on gross rent. And then comparing that to peer cities also. And then just, the value to income ratio by census group. So he did do a lot.
That's done in a heat map, so it's like, so you can see that distributed
color
around the
coded,
community.
and then
Okay.
he has, yeah. So that was interesting too, because you can see obviously a lot of that is kind of around that, that central city area, but at the same time, you can tell, and it's in the demographic chapter, but then it's also, kind of through other areas. It shows like on Marion Road where we have new multifamily, developments coming in. So it shows more people moving to that area too. So it kind of shows both things, how, the central city in particular, the the median income is lower, but then at the same time, now we're having these new developments coming in. So it'll be interesting to kind of watch that change in the next 10 years, or, you know, as far as when the American Community Survey results come out, just to see if there's any impact with that, with the new redevelopments coming along in the central city.
Jason, look
I
on
wanna-
page 35.
Page 35.
And
Is that what-
32, also on 32.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for or not.
How about the distribution between, say, one side of town versus another? Say like the west side versus the east side, as far as distribution of some of these categories. Is it equally distributed, or is it showing that there's
I think in some situations it is equally distributed. Now, as you get towards the south side of town and the west side, those census tracts grow much larger. So it's not quite an apples to apples, but you can kind of see the shift, like, you show the median income and some of those other, data points. You can obviously see where that is, and then it kind of grows as you move out to the city, outside of the city as you're going to the north, south, not the east, but you can see that kind of change too. So that is in there also.
Thank you.
And to Jason's point, I was kind of looking myself for some population density heat mapping in here because, for example, I live in Census Tract 5, and I know that there are 6,600 people living in less than a square mile. And so I think that's important for us to consider, and perhaps it's in here in the demographic section. There's population change I see on 29, but I don't see population density, which I think is important, as Jason pointed out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now that could be something I can look through here and just see if there is anything, but just to kind of get that basis of, what the actual population density is. That's a good point.
Just a point, and I don't know, Kelly, if you know about this website, but it's 211counts.org, COUNTS.
Okay.
And you can search by zip code, and it will give you all kinds of information. And I use this when I would speak to university groups to show them where the highest rates of poverty were in Oshkosh as opposed to, the east side, the west side, or north or south. And then it also will tell you information. You can look for a lot of stuff, but it'll tell you information about the parents or the graduation rates, the percentage of rentals in that area. And supposedly it's kept up on a real regular basis, and it's nationwide, but then you click on the state and you type in your zip codes.
Yeah.
Or select your zip codes, and it'll give you all this information with a map that you can hover over. So that might be some useful information in the future to use.
Do you want to mention that website one more time, Sue?
Yeah, it's 211counts, COUNTS.org.
Perfect, thanks. Yeah, it is really great when there's organizations like that have that information just out there readily available. The city, we have a few of those, different programs too, and it is amazing the information you can find. So I have no doubt that we'll probably, be using that in the future more as we're looking ahead at implementation.
I mean, there's a lot more information on it, like the percent of people that call into 211 for food needs and all that kind of stuff. But when you look at the map, you can hover over the sections and it will tell you, how many people are in that section. Like I'm looking at 54904, and it'll say that there are 15 to 19,999 people, 6% rate of poverty, where the state average is 13, 2.8% unemployment, 3.3% high school diploma, and 20% rental. And then if I switch over to 01, the number goes to 26% poverty.
Sure, interesting. Were there any other questions on the housing study?
Nice job.
There's a lot of information in here, so it's going to take us a while to kind of dissect it and get through it, but we're excited and we're up for the challenge.
Well, then where does it go from here?
So as I mentioned, we're going to start to reach out to some of the city boards and commissions and talk about it with them. And then obviously with Plan Commission and Council, we'll work with them with formally adopting it after we have time to receive public comments and everything. And then we anticipate that we'll have a workshop, multiple workshops with Council to talk about it in a little more in depth, and then probably figure out what would be some of those recommendations we want to start to look at implementing. And at the same time, on a parallel track, I hope to kind of go on a road show with, and talk about the study with some of the different community organizations and civic groups to really get that message out there, and, so people are aware that we have it and start promoting it. And then hopefully we can start to, get going and start implementing some of the ideas that they have in there. So just a short little project. No, it'll be a while. This is a long-term plan, but it's a great place to start, and it's a working, living document, which I'm sure will change many times, but we have to start somewhere.
All right. So it looks like our next item on the agenda is the RDA Properties Overview.
Yes.
And that starts on, I don't see a page number in the packet, but it's roughly page 17 if you have your hard copy packet.
Right. And we sent a hard copy to everybody, just so a lot of times we bring it up on the screen, but it's so hard to read. So we figure let's just print this out once and everybody has a hard copy, and then we can kind of go from there. So this was discussed at the last meeting and multiple meetings before that. And what I think we discussed wanting to try to do is to get a handle on the properties that the RDA owns and figure out, obviously some we're saving for future right of way, and some, we're trying to land bank for a larger development area. And, every property kind of has a different use, and then some are just scattered sites because the house is about to fall down and it's in a foreclosure, and we're usually the ones that, raise it to protect the value of neighborhoods. But we have a spreadsheet that we do keep here at the city. And Sean and Jason, I know and even Ann, I know you guys all work on this too. So please jump in if I, misspeak or you want to add anything. But we have a list of all the properties in our spreadsheet, and we try to keep track of how it was acquired, the parcel ID, what it's zoned, acreage, how much we acquired it for, when we acquired it, what type of funds we used. And then we have been trying to, as we've been promoting these properties more, we've assigned a sale price in some situations, and then we just have, potential reuse of it just to keep notes. So as we move forward, we're trying to just making sure that, we're keeping up with all the properties, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit with the financials also, as far as the maintenance for each property. But if we just before we kind of start talking about the different properties, we have a map of an overall city map of all the different properties that we have up here on the screen. And then we kind of go into the different properties that the RDA owns, that Sean had worked with our GIF staff person, highlighting all of them. And then, of course, we can talk about some of those kind of cluster areas where we're trying to promote some of that redevelopment also. So I don't know, if RDA would like to go through page, or if you had a chance to go through it and have some questions. But I was just going to talk about some of the areas, that we're looking at land banking, that we have been, and talk about kind of where we're at with that. And then if it's, something that we want to discuss as far as moving forward, moving ahead in the future, should we continue to focus on these areas, or is there other areas we should focus on? So I think those are some of maybe the discussions that we could have today.
Kelly, I'm gonna ask about a specific one on here, 1125 Main Street North. It's about halfway down. Hold for Gateway Project, but then it's listed under South Shore. And I'm a little confused how we would have a North Main Street address in a South Shore redevelopment.
Is that on the spreadsheet, did you say?
Yes, about halfway down.
Okay.
1125 Main Street North. Maybe it's just a typo.
I'm guessing it is a typo, but let's look here.
And what does no sale mean in the status?
I'm trying to, Sean, do you know?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that's an error.
Okay.
The reference to South Shore there is an error.
Oh,
So our apologies for that. No sale, there are certain properties that, you know, as Kelly mentioned, we're attempting to land bank, or we're saving them for a, you know, there's an area over by Oshkosh and Oshkosh Avenue in Sawyer where I'm sorry, where the intersection is going to be going through, and we've acquired some properties. So in that case, you know, we're not actively selling them. We're not making them available if someone were to approach us and ask about purchasing them.
yeah, so the Gateway Project, that's the one you're talking about on North Main Street. It's just south of New York, and it's actually old railroad right away. And we have talked about potentially putting, it's just open space right now, but since that's somewhat of a busy intersection, and I wouldn't call it a gateway into the city, but we thought, you know, if we ever wanted to put, you know, a gateway, you know, sign or do something, but we do still, you know, if somebody is interested in it, we obviously, you know, would consider it. But we just try to put some notes in there just so you know, we have an idea, like, oh, you know, should we look at selling that or not? And then, like I had mentioned, you know, we have some areas where, you know, it's future right of way. So that's kind of in that potential reuse. We have some of those different notes.
Would that happen to be one of the 5 that the RDA set aside for community garden space just south of the old computer corner, I think it was called, on the west side of Maine?
It might be.
It's that weird shaped lot?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's in that area. We actually have 2 parcels there. We have a city parcel and we have an RDA parcel. So my guess
Okay.
is it was probably on the RDA one.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand what you said, but no sale means we're not marketing it actively because there are some potential plans for those that have no sale, right?
Correct.
Okay. Other, do the other RDA members want to go through property by property, or just ask some general questions and this gets put on the next agenda as well?
I just have a general question. Well, I guess it's kind of specific. I can't tell you what page it's on, but it's 7th, 8th, and 9th Avenue. We seem to have a lot of property between 8th and 9th property, 8th and 9th avenues between Nebraska and Oregon.
We do.
Is there
Yes.
something that we're planning there?
Yes, I have it up on the screen here. So this is an area where situations here between 8th and 9th and over on Jefferson, coincidentally, there was multiple houses that the RDA started acquiring. And it just became one of those things where it's like, okay, well, maybe this would be a good, you know, redevelopment area. So all of the parcels highlighted here, Sue, the RDA owns. You can see that all but one of the parcels are vacant, but there is one right on the north side that does have a house on it, and we do currently lease it out to Avocap for transitional housing. So we've had multiple folks, you know, in this area reach out to the city, or excuse me, to the RDA when they are looking at trying to sell or whatever they're doing. So this is in the South Shore redevelopment area also, but this would be the vision for this area was, as you see to the east there, Brian Burns did that redevelopment with those townhomes on that former Miles Kimball property. And I believe at the time when RDA started acquiring these properties here, that was sort of the vision that they saw for this block also. So like I said, we're kind of at a point now where, having this discussion, we have our housing study, and here we are where we own almost half of the block here. So from a staff perspective, and then from RDA, is it something where we want to continue, trying to acquire these homes as they become available? Or is it something we should just try to redevelop it now and move on to a different area? And I think that's some of the conversation that we talked about wanting to have. And I guess the other area that that's happened too is Jefferson Street also, between Main and Jefferson and Irving and Parkway to the south there. And the the RDA has been acquiring properties as they become available. And we have a pretty good development site. And I just actually was talking to a developer a couple of days ago about this site. So we continue to market this area too and look for opportunities for acquisition if it makes sense.
And if I could just point out, for those of you who may not be familiar, these have been sitting vacant since, I would say, before 2008. I mean, there may be one or two that were picked up since that time, but these have long been vacant. And there was an option that was taken out, and the community gardens that were previously there were sent along after 3 years of success there. And so, I'm especially interested in hearing what other folks, because there've been, as you said, maybe some inquiries, but no action for that many years.
But if I recall, and this is kind of scary that I'm thinking this way already, wasn't this that section of property that we wanted to see if we could acquire more because they needed to have dual access to the property? They needed an access from Jefferson also and an access from Maine. And
Yeah.
isn't there a bar in there that we looked at one point?
Yep, and if you could kind of see, we did acquire 668 North Main, and that building is down right now. So we do have access off of North Main and then off of obviously Jefferson too. And then we have been the owner of 660, I'd have to see what that address is, just south of 664, that bar, or not bar, retail shop. We have been talking about to the owner of those properties too. He's aware of the project and has been engaged with us also. So part of the reason why I think they did sit vacant, and Mayor Palmieri is correct. I see on here we started acquiring in 2006 through 2013. So we just had been picking them up as they became available, just as to kind of build that development site that's large enough. So the site, I think we're kind of getting there, and we have a few inquiries out, a few different potential options that we might be able to get even more land as part of this larger area too. So this is an area where we would hope that there'd be some sort of multifamily, if it's something like the townhomes that are to the west on Division, or if it's, some other, low income WIDA tax credit redevelopment, we would like to see some sort of value created there.
And just so folks are, again, familiar, again, this is one of the densest area of the city, densest population. So I think that it's important for us to have those discussions, and whether it be the 8th and 9th Street or this area, or others, that, you know, we take that into consideration with, you know, providing some guidance as to what we'd like to see. And the previous neighborhood plan that was related to this is extremely outdated. So, you know, that was my hope, is that this group of great minds could give some input as to what you'd like to see. But it's kind of hard when you're looking at a section this small and not taking the greater context, surrounding context, into consideration.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Jason?
Yeah, I think, you know, the RDA has had great intent in the past to make these clusters to create a greater impact for redevelopment, as opposed to like a one-off site of tearing down a house or tearing down a garage or combining two lots or selling a lot to the neighbor kind of impact, because those seem to have limited impact in some of areas that kind of could use larger impacts. And so our ability to create these larger impacts, I think, is a great benefit for some of these areas. And I know that it takes time, but redevelopment takes time. And what we're going to see on that Nebraska development, for instance, is when the new developer decides to develop that side of the river and create economic value there, you know, that's going to enhance those properties as well. And so I think that there's nothing wrong with us at times waiting for good things to happen, because they will happen. And I think that part of part of what we have as a benefit is sustainability and patience. And so what the potential impact of these areas are for those particular neighborhoods, I think are pretty substantial. And I look forward to the day when we can, you know, see good things happen there.
And I guess on that same topic, on the Jefferson piece, I would love to see the day where we stop talking about it as a Jefferson project, but the main project, where we collect enough of those on the Main Street side where it's almost rebranded to a certain degree. You have kind of that full street access. And I guess I don't know what those parcels are today, but I think ultimately long term, if you can get to that point, it's a little bit more attractive for redevelopment than just the Jefferson side of that street or section.
Kelly, did the city manager and Mr. Mauer talk with you too about or community development about looking at the lack of green space and park space downtown in relation to that population density? You know, potentially looking at sites, and did they mention having any kind of conversation with RDA?
We didn't specifically mention RDA, but I'm always community development as a whole. We always are working with parks on, you know, as we have different development projects move forward, we do have requirements where they have to have a certain amount of green space, you know, for their, you know, the residents. So in this situation, if there would be, let's just say a multifamily redevelopment that comes online on the, you know, Main Jefferson redevelopment, that they would have some requirements for green space, and much similar to like the T-wall redevelopment projects on the south side of the river, they have a lot of that green space. So it's not usually a full-blown city park for the multifamily projects, but that is something that we are looking at with our subdivision code. We want to make sure that where, you know, we keep up with where the population is, where it's growing, and, you know, where we need to have those city parks and offer those amenities, so it is, you know, equal throughout the community.
I've got a comment on that. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
I've been having some conversations in the community, and I was aware of of an idea to add more green space next to the convention center up to and abutting, the Leach Amphitheater. And that property, frankly, would make a fantastic park. And to alleviate the loss of parking, the property across the street makes a natural addition. And so I think that the long-term vision of that as an entertainment district was to potentially add more of a park, atmosphere in that area. And so I would hope to see some of that conversation potentially move forward if possible. And it's a great area, that could bridge the downtown to a district, which I don't know if the city's been talking about that, in the background it also.
Jason, can I ask you, I've heard this reference a number of times that there was a long-term vision for that area to be an entertainment district. Can you help me understand the genesis of that? Because I'm not quite sure where that comes from.
Well, I think it was originally when the city was talking about how to engage the foundation in supporting the area to come to fruition. And then their involvement in making it happen was, I think, the genesis of that conversation.
Did it ever?
That was the long-term vision for that area. And by doing some of these by the Leach Amphitheater is kind of a, you call it like an anchor. And so then, well, like the arena, once you have those anchors, then, good things can spread out, from them. And so the intent was to get that big bang at the amphitheater, I think, and then, over time be able to fill that in as properties became available. And but I think that's also a conversation needed with the city to determine if that's a need, want, or desire. So
I just have a quick point. When I managed the Hooper building, which was located next to Ref Beer and whatever, when we sold that building it turned into the parking lot, but there was never any discussion about that becoming an entertainment district at that time. And so I was a bit surprised also to hear that this was the entertainment district. And I thought maybe I missed something, because I always thought we considered the entertainment district in South Main. But do we have multiple entertainment districts?
Well, I think what Mr. Lasky might be talking about, which has been referenced before, is there have been a few downtown studies done. One was done back in, I believe it was probably about 2000. I think that was the 2000 action plan, and that was LDR did that study. And we had a lot of great things coming out of that study, such as the, the Leach, the Opera House Square Park, the convention center.
It was like community livability, really. It was like the whole premise. It was fantastic.
Yeah, streetscaping. So it was a very successful plan, because I think over 90% was implemented, which is amazing for plans. And in that plan, there was different ideas for Riverside Park and what could be done. And obviously the Leach was a part of that, and the convention center expanding that too. It didn't specifically address, specific parcels to the like on the north side of CP or in Broad area. And then we also had the Imagine Oshkosh plan, which was basically kind of like the next step, Downtown Action Plan 2.0 that we did about probably 3-4 years ago now. And again, since some of those properties and some of those uses were as far as like the housing authority owned, some of the property, and then it was residential, they didn't really go into too much detail as far as redeveloping it. So, but there's definitely, I think, you could, look at the plans and see that area was, especially, south of CP, the envision, to envision a entertainment area, a walkable area, for the conventions and visitors and just city residents also.
And
So
I also think that one of the benefits was that it was supposed to help enhance the adjacent neighborhoods as well. So that kind of we're in a terrible situation.
sure. Yeah. So, so those are just, I guess, some of the considerations that, as we move forward, because staff, we get a lot of calls from different folks as far as, do you want to buy my property? We get a list from the county monthly or every couple months with foreclosures. So we have a lot of different opportunities to purchase properties, but we want to make sure that we are, using our time wisely and pursuing opportunities that the RDA will support, where you believe that, you want to see the redevelopment in the community.
Well, just another quick question for another piece of property that I don't know who owns. It's the one that's across the street from 36 Broad Street, which is now currently the Cooper Community Center, but it's right on the river by the bridge.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be some cool property to also develop. I do know that I understand. Is that what the R is there? Yeah.
Yep, that is the R. So I put that in there for reference. And this snapshot is actually from the Imagine Oshkosh plan. And that was one of their, an opportunity site, they called it. That is currently owned by a private company. I heard that there probably is contamination on the site.
Yeah, I heard the same.
So it is something that the city has never, or RDA, I don't know, has ever pursued. I'm not familiar with any attempts, but if that's a site that the RDA is interested in, I will start trying to track down people. They have a PO box in Oshkosh, and so it's very vague. So there'd be a lot of research that would probably have to go into that one.
Yeah, I used to know the name of the company because we reached out to them to possibly put in a parking lot for the Hooper building at one point.
Okay, yeah, it's
And-
like Bolin Petroleum or something like
Yeah,
that.
they turned us right down. It may have been sold since then, but that would be a potential for another pool park, I think.
I hope that at some point, Kelly, you can share the green space future land acquisition needs in the city map from the Corp plan. I'm not saying that redevelopment makes that decision, but I think it's definitely something to have in consideration, because if you look at that circle around north of the river, you've got about 20,000 people living in that central area, 1/3 of the population being served by less than 2 acres of park space. And that is quite different the closer, obviously, I should say 20,000 people living more than a 10-minute walk from a city park, because the Menominee Park is considered a community park. So it just may be helpful for folks to know that in the context. You've got Rowe Park, which is 1.65 acres by the YMCA. And then, of course, you have the Riverside Park and Menominee, but everything north and west it's like a green space desert. I think that goes all the way up to Nicolay.
Sure. And I brought up the neighborhood association map here that we have because I think our neighborhood associations are really engaged in those kind of community parks, and having that space that is walkable, like you said, Mary, for folks to to enjoy in their area. So we do offer programs through community development here to develop public spaces in the different neighborhood associations. So that's always a conversation if that is something that the RDA would want to try to support, the neighborhood associations or areas within potentially the central city where maybe there isn't as much green space as there should be, that could be a priority that, the city could work with, the RDA could work with the Parks Department and on to see if that's something that, could be a benefit that we could bring to those areas.
Jason.
Oh, sorry.
Mayor Pember, can you clarify that area again? I'm sorry.
So I'm speaking generally north of the river, between the university and say Stevens Park, that going up to north of New York, I would say between New York, the river, bounded by the university and Menominee Park, there's, about 20,000, almost a third of the population living in that area.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And if the RDA would like, I can certainly, I think this conversation is going to continue. We're talking about a lot today, so I think it'd be a great topic to talk about again, but we can certainly, bring some of that information forward next time for green space or that core plan, to talk about and analyze and see if there was, any connections or any involvement we would have.
Well, and especially relating back to what you were referencing, the LDR and the Imagine Oshkosh plan, where it talks about, enhancing quality of life for the shoulder neighborhoods, I think is the language that was used in those plans. The shoulder neighborhoods, off of Main and into, what is now Midtown and Fourth Ward and that. And I think there's also a dearth or a lack down in, is it Census Tract 11 that's just south of the river there?
Yes.
Like,
or 7, I'd have to look.
right. Yeah, there's also a shortage in that area too. And one of the newest distressed census tracts, which is that the right word, Kelly? Difficult to develop areas, DDAs, newly distressed and identified by the Census Bureau is, I think it's either Census Tract 11 or 14 with a high rate of poverty, which we have not seen under the DDAs before. We've seen Census Tract 5. We've seen Census Tract 7, of course, which is the university, but this is a newly identified distressed area.
I brought up GIS so you could see. Let me move everything here off. Okay. Are you able to see GIS here, this map
Yes.
here? Okay, so the green is the parks. So you can kind of see over here, our new Lakeshore Park, County Park up here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of zoom in to Central City. So maybe Mayor Palmieri, you were talking about the, New York is kind of that northern area with the park, or with the kind of where the potential need is, the northern boundary.
And keep in mind that green spot to the left of Jackson, come down a little, right there. That is not a publicly accessible green space. That is restricted access owned by the university. And the fence and the signs tell you that. So that's a bit misleading on here.
Yeah, and obviously, this area is university property here too, along the Riverwalk, and we have Leech as part of a park, so it's not a perfect visual to show exactly where everything is, but it kind of gives you an idea at least.
And Kelly, the one on the south side that I was talking about, that newly identified as of 2022 distressed area, I want to say it's down there around like 3rd and 4th Avenue, to
Okay.
the left. I can't remember if it's to the left or to the right of Ohio.
I think it might be to the left. Actually, I think it's kind of in this area here.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, because I'm pretty in tune with all the different designations here, because then we usually get more tax credits and more financing options. So I do think it's kind of in this area here, which sometimes it's hard to understand why, certain areas are, certain areas aren't, but they obviously have some formula and some rhyme or reason how they come up with those designations. So.
Well, thank you so much for everybody's thoughts on this. So we'll put this back on the agenda for next meeting then to go a little bit further with this.
Yeah, we can certainly provide some more information, and if anybody, in the meantime has any specific questions or ideas or areas you want to talk about, please feel free to send them our way, and we'll try to do some researching or due diligence before the meeting and then bring it back to the whole group.
But is it the intent that in the near future, we would start some action planning for these scattered sites that are not in the redevelopment, already identified redevelopment areas?
Yeah, so the city, obviously, that we're trying to sell homes and kind of those parcels that are just like a one-off where we're not land banking. So we're trying to be somewhat aggressive with that. And the housing study identified some programming to hopefully even, promote that infill development even more. So what I would like to know though is, and I think other staff members would, is there certain areas that you would like to focus on? And then is there areas where maybe we're trying to redevelop or, land bank right now, but maybe you're saying, well, it's just not working out. Maybe we should try to do this and switch gears. So just to kind of gather some of that feedback, I think would be appreciated.
All right, thank you.
Great. The next item, and it kind of goes into our conversation that we just had, is we've been talking a lot about acquiring properties, but one of the discussion at the last meeting, we showed you our RDA budget, and there was a lot of information on there. So just to kind of simplify things to go along with the previous agenda item is our funding sources. And we have multiple funding sources, and there is a page in your agenda that does have, or in your packet that does have the different funding sources. So annually, the RDA, or excuse me, the city does borrow funding for scattered sites and blight removal, South Shore sawdust redevelopment. We also borrowed for some gateway improvements, and that's part of our corridor planning that we're continuing to implement. Our 9th Street, Jackson Street, our South Park Ave corridor plans. And then obviously South Main Street acquisition, and then Grove Street redevelopment. So the city borrows funds through our capital improvement program, and that is just over $1 million that was borrowed. Now, the Grove Street redevelopment, for instance, that's actually near the former Mercy Medical Center, and that is some land that the city actually acquired when Mercy moved to their new location out by Oakwood. And we have a tax incremental district out there. And there's actually money in that district that we are going to apply to projects on Grove Street. We're working with Habitat for Humanity, and they will be building 6 single-family homes out there. So we're really excited about this project, and we're going to help them with some of the site costs because unfortunately, it is a redevelopment site. There were, foundations there. There's some contamination, and we have to do stormwater management. So that $200,000 for Grove Street redevelopment, really, the money's been allocated towards that project already. But the 4 other accounts is funding that was approved for 2022. And then we talk about community development block grant. We usually include an allocation annually in our action plan for blight removal. And so with some of the remaining funds we have from previous program years, we have roughly 200,000 left where we could use that money also. So the total is just under 1.5 million. If you take about out the Grove Street, $1.25 million of funds right now that the RDA could use. It's not exclusively the RDA's funding, but the intent is, that the RDA would be that leader in identifying some of those opportunities for possible acquisition.
Kelly, I think most folks are familiar that the Redevelopment Authority is this, separate kind of body politic, or it's a separate entity.
Sure. Yep.
The question that I have, if we refer back to the housing study, where one of the recommendations is a CDC, a Community Development Corporation. I want to say I had been reading an article where some redevelopment authorities have combined with housing and community development authorities, if you will, for this hybrid. Is that something that, maybe I'm mistaken, but is that something that, this body should also have a conversation about?
Yeah, right. And you are correct. It could be a conversation, and I will just start by saying every redevelopment authority and every municipality is different. Everybody kind of has it set up their own way that meets their needs. So really, the way that the city of Oshkosh set up the RDA, it's a separate entity, but we obviously depend on the city for everything. So we're definitely under the umbrella, and we're pretty much right next to the city. So there would have to be some changes as far as if there would be an opportunity where we would maybe want to look at either, like you said, partnering with somebody else to create a housing partnership development, group, or if it'd be a new organization. But that's on page, it looks like 108 of the document. So if that's something, as we look at the next meeting, we want to talk about.
I'd like to make a comment just
Sure.
on that, just for the fact that I think that the RDA has, one of the purposes of the RDA, I think, would be to assist in the redevelopment for housing. But it's not limited to that. And I think that may be a risk, is if you combine with a dedicated housing organization and then have them help us address business that may be industrial property or something that's not particularly suitable for housing, that it may not be a good fit in like the long-term approach like that. So there may be reasons to keep some independence, but it's something that I think should definitely be looked at, how to work together with an organization like that.
Sure. Yeah, I anticipate many conversations with different organizations, and even talking to other municipalities that have these sort of community development corporations, just to see how they're set up, what works, what doesn't. So we're going to be doing a lot of research, I think, just to see how this could be set up here in Oshkosh before we take the plunge to do something similar. Is there any other questions on the funding? Like I said, we just wanted to share. I know the last meeting we talked about our actual budget, but we did want to share that council is very supportive of the redevelopment efforts that the RDA is doing and the removal of blight. So we do have a pretty decent pot of money that we are able to use if there is an opportunity. And it's something that, as staff will continue to fight for. And we know that there's probably going to be some costs potentially in the South Shore, near the Sawdust District. We we've been talking about, maybe doing some expansion of or reconstruction of South Main Street to expand it. And, we're looking at extending 9th Ave through this coming year. So, there'll definitely probably be some costs that, we might need to incur that, we might need to try to, use some of these funds for to facilitate that redevelopment. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, if everybody is okay, we can move on to the next item, the executive director's report. I won't go into too much detail, but we are, like I said, continuing to work with the multiple developers on the South Shore, including the T-Wall Development Group, Mr. Art Dumke, and Mr. Andy Dumke also. And I know today there was just an article in the, I believe the Oshkosh Examiner, talking about the Morgan District. And the city does not know who the new owner or buyer is either. We've just talked with the broker and the representation. So we are excited to whoever it is to work with them, and hope that will be a great redevelopment project on our South Shore. We're working with Chet Wiesenberg and Tim Hess on their redevelopment on the Boatworks property. Right now, we're working with our environmental consultant to try to do those phase 1s, phase 2s that, the developers need to move forward with their site design. And then also hopping over to the North Shore, the Merge Group. We just actually had a call with them yesterday, and they said they've had great responses for Brio. They're getting a lot of inquiries. If you've drove out there in that area, you've seen that they're working on their first phase on Parcel J. So they're going to have multiple buildings on that Parcel J. That's the one on the corner of Marion and Jackson, right on the river there. But if you recall, on Parcel I, that's that on the north side of Marion Road, it's just south of the water tower. They were just going to have, I think, maybe 8 or 12 walkout units. They're actually going to expand that. They want to do more units because they're getting, so many inquiries and there's such a demand. So I think they're going to expand that project on that parcel too. So that'll be great because it will create more value, in that area of the city too. So a lot of exciting redevelopment projects, going on in the community right now. Did anybody have any questions about any specific areas or any RDA properties?
Just real quick, Kelly, I know that we've got that dry cleaning contaminated little parcel down off of is it Pearl, next to the near the Grand and the photo studio.
Yes.
I randomly think I want to ask about that and always forget to. I'm assuming there's a plume of contamination there that prevents us from doing anything with that. I know it's just a little tiny parcel, but I have heard from a number of folks what an eyesore it is to have this long vacant gravel space downtown. And I just occurred to me to ask you if that is if there's been any inquiries or if, what the limitations are on that parcel.
Sure. Well, first I'll tell you that we do not own it. That's
Oh.
actually still privately owned. Yes. And I'm bringing it on the map here so folks know where we're talking about. We have had some conversations about purchasing it. But as you had said, it's very contaminated. So it's one of those where if we do want to try to go for it, we're going to have to commit to it, which, we're not afraid of doing. But coincidentally, we have talked, it's this parcel right here. So this is the Thompson photo studio here. And then as Mayor Palmieri mentioned, this is the Grand over here. So we know that there is some contamination, and actually you see all these little circles here. Those are where monitoring wells are. So there's some contamination in this whole area. But right now, this is the transit center here too. And we are looking at the different options for the transit center as they're looking at, enhancing their offerings. So we are taking into consideration the whole neighborhood, if you will. It may be, something that the, city staff might come back to our DA members about, but yes, right now this is privately owned.
Oh, my mistake. My apologies.
No, that's okay. A lot of people think if there's a vacant parcel, the RDA owns it. So we're used to that. Don't worry. Well, if there's no other questions, talking about future agenda items, we will put an agenda item on. I'll do another housing study update because I think it goes along with a lot of our conversations if everybody's agreeable to that. And then obviously talking about the RDA properties where I'll bring in some more information such as the green space or the court plan. Is everybody agreeable to that?
Yes.
Okay.
Would it be helpful to review any previous studies that were done from like, the downtown redevelopment things and stuff like that?
Yeah, we can certainly send that out beforehand, or at least share some of the highlights of it, like I kind of just did with that Imagine Oshkosh slide, where we had some of those potential redevelopment sites, opportunities. So we can definitely bring that in for consideration when talking about the areas that we should be looking at focusing on.
Oh, one other question, Kelly. At one point here in recent years, I thought that there was some discussion about the potential for the U.S. Bank. I want to say that there was a conceptual proposal maybe on some redevelopment of the U.S. Bank building. Am I imagining that? I'm sorry.
Mentioning it. No, you're not. You're not. We did have some developers that were interested in possibly redeveloping that building. And if everybody's on the same page, the U.S. Bank building is on North Main Street on the 200 block, or excuse me, the 100 block. 200. They're just across from 100 North Main. 100. Sorry, I'm getting my blocks mixed up here. And right now, U.S. Bank is just really taking up the first floor. And I don't even think they're taking up the whole first floor, but those upper floors are vacant. So there was some discussion about converting those into residential units, but that did not go through, and we have not really heard anything. We've talked with multiple developers about it, but nothing that's really come through that's, for serious consideration.
And then one other, I guess, clarifying question, if you don't have the answer to this now, maybe it's an item for a future agenda discussion. So with RDA statutorily, dedicated for redevelopment, and we primarily identify central city redevelopment, right?
Mm-hmm.
At what point do areas, for example, of like the West Side, maybe the Outlet Mall, or some of the 1960s areas, start to age out into, I guess, outer ring redevelopment?
No, absolutely. That's a good question. I mean, we actually, did the redevelopment project at Aviation Plaza. That was the former Walmart area and the Piggly Wiggly, and that area has been redeveloped. So from a city standpoint, we say 50 years. So really you're looking at, the 1970s. So you are correct. There's plenty of houses on the west side that are older, than 1970. So that is something, as we do, I believe, we do focus a lot of our efforts in the central city, but I think that there will be opportunities where we will be looking on the south side of the river, on the west side, even, over by the interstates at redevelopment here too. So yeah, we should definitely, keep an open mind with a lot of the different opportunities that might be out there.
the reason I was specifically kind of curious was I recently relocated my sister from Florida, and she had pointed out an old strip mall and an old mall, you know, kind of like our Fox Valley Mall, that are currently under development for housing. I can't remember what the term was, but it was like an interior town with its own little kind of, you know, grocery and shopping in the center and residential kind of in some of the former retail spaces, which, you know, Southwest Florida, that's just kind of wow. It's amazing to see what some of the adaptive reuse, you know, that maybe we would not have imagined, you know, 10 or 15 years ago is happening in other parts of the country.
Absolutely. We all have our different, niches. So I think you are correct. With between big box stores or if it's strip malls or even like the outlet mall, I think that's something that we'll probably have, some involvement in the future here.
We found a niche, I guess. It's storage.
I was just gonna
Boxes are
say,
going to storage, so
That
let's
is
just,
all
I guess, keep
over.
doing that, right?
It's
yes,
all over. It's any city USA. I mean, you just drive and it's such a big thing, that climate controlled storage.
the climate controlled storage, and it's really interesting, right? That some of those retail areas are turning into that. If you, I don't know, I guess in my mind, I'm thinking, well, why don't you just rent a space in the Amazon warehouse instead of having it shipped to you? Just tell them to store it for you until you need it.
Yeah. Easier said than done, right? Well, if there isn't any other ideas for future agenda items, please feel free, if there's anything that comes up between the next meeting, let me know. Otherwise, we will gather, more information for you, send it to you before the meeting, and hopefully to kind of continue this discussion.
All right, so we're at no more other business, no additional business, so we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, please call the roll.
Birmingham,
Aye.
Lasky. Lasky,
Aye. Aye.
Ponick,
Aye.
Belter,
Aye.
and Palmieri.
Aye. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, you too.